Parents play an irreplaceable role in the lives of their children. To a child, how they grow up and what they see their parents do is normal. So when brothers Carl and Tori Mertz grew up watching their father Paul run his own lawn and garden business, they just saw it as normal.
So he's been there for about 30 years. We lived about 6 blocks. We walked to school, walked there after school and like play with the seeds, you know. So one of the biggest things I remember is my dad has never worked for anybody else. You know, I can't imagine him working for anyone else. It just doesn't seem like his personality.
Entrepreneurship seemed normal to Carl and Tori because their dad ran Gate City Seed in Keokuk. Named after Chief Keokuk, leader of the Sac and Fox Indians at the turn of the 19th century, today it has a population just over 10,000. Growing up, it didn't take Carl and Tori long to start a business of their own.
I think the first time we did anything entrepreneurial together was, I was probably 8.
Probably a little younger, actually.
Yeah. So during the flood of '93, a lot of bridges and things were flooded in the Keokuk area, and you couldn't go across the bridge anymore. So what they did is they let people walk across the dam. And on the Keokuk side, there was a dam, and then there was a really big bluff that you had to climb up to get to the end. And by the time you got to the end, you were thirsty as you could ever be. And we decided it would be a pretty good idea to set up a lemonade stand at the top. And we made bank during that.
The first day we went, and we had like 1 pitcher of Kool-Aid, right? So we went in there, we saw everyone panting, they went up. And then the next day we, we're at 2. And then the next day we had this whole setup. I mean, we had like soda, we had water, everything they could
Candy
need, right?
bars.
We had like this little operation going on. It was so popular at the time that I think CNN came and did a little shot on us and stuff. And that was our first experience of working together.
I think we actually invented selling water at that time, because I don't remember bottled water being bigger on them, but we had a cooler that we were actually selling water, and we were like, man, this is genius.
They could sell lemonade to anybody. They could sell water, sell water out of a cup. They thought, well, we're going to make more profit doing that. And of course they did. They were always thinking, how are we going to make some money in this? I think it was more the camaraderie together, the competition, how are we going to make the money more than the money itself. It was the experience of actually doing it.
Carl and Tori spent a lot of time in their dad's shop, but they weren't always just playing around. They were paying attention.
Customer satisfaction, that was something that they were always impressed with, and I know that stuck with them because I've always instilled that in them. You have to have a satisfied customer, not going to come back. You make money one day, but you might not make it the next. And they showed this actually with their soft drinks and water that were selling in the flood of '93. They realized it had to be icy cold. I want them to buy it tomorrow, and that was one thing. I can't remember which one of them brought that up, but it costs money to buy the ice. One of them said that, and the other one says, yeah, but if it's icy cold, they're going to buy it the next day. And so these things kind of instilled in them from an early age.
Now, all grown up, the brothers went off to find their own path. Carl eventually joined the Army, and Tori got a job as a computer programmer. Neither of the brothers were content with their occupations, so they decided to start their own company together.
The Army is just such a formal kind of setting. This is how it's done, right? And I was sort of feeling that in a different way in the corporate world, and we were like, all right, well, what are we going to do? And we said, well, let's just do this. We had no idea what we were going to build. We just knew the type of company we wanted to build and that we had to find a problem to actually solve. One thing that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into is they're too forward thinking. They see problems before they ever come up, and they're building solutions that people don't need right now, or that they don't care for, or they wouldn't pay for, right? And we said we need to find a problem that people actually pay to solve.
After talking with businesses in the insurance industry, they identified several problems. The two brothers formed Rocket Referrals, a software company that helps businesses communicate with their customers. Rocket Referrals discovers a company's most loyal clients and helps build relationships, increase retention, and as a result, grow revenue. The software is automated so that business owners can focus on what they do best, while Rocket Referrals takes care of client relationships.
And the thing about this survey is it's actually an indicator of loyalty opposed to satisfaction. So the difference is loyalty says how likely are they to refer you, how likely are they to recommend you, stay with you, retention, referrals, repeat business, etc. And those are really what you want to hone in on. And by far, 65%, the number one reason is because they had positive and meaningful, regular communication with their insurance agent. That's the number one reason. Price was in there about 8%. Being friendly, 12%, for example, having nice staff, 8%. So these are some other things that are important, but by far the number one reason is that regular communication.
Those are the things that work. We just need to figure out how to automate it so that you can still do all of the other things that you need to do, because imagine how much, there's a heck of a lot more regulation and rules and things you guys have to worry about now than you probably did back then too, right? So your job's getting harder. And what's happening is we're sacrificing the personalized communication that you used to do.
So in a nutshell, Rocket Referrals is a software product that helps insurance agents automate customer relations. To get the business off the ground, Carl and Tori fell into what most startup companies try to do: find investors. But they realized that seeking investment money didn't line up with their mission.
And what we found is that we were losing touch of what we were here for. And at one point, we literally it was like a 5-minute meeting we were talking about investment, and we look at each other and we're like, the amount of money that we're trying to raise, we could make in 6 months if we really worked hard and just did it. And so we said, all right, we're not going to raise money, we're going to earn money.
Had we taken investment money, I just want to say, we would have, rather than focusing on making our product better, we would have focused on making the investors happy. We would have focused on ramping everything up as quickly as we can before we have a solid client base, before it's really proven. And so I think that's a mistake a lot of people get into, is they look for the money and then they chase whatever dream the investors give them.
After making the decision to fund their business through money earned, the brothers started to sell their product before it existed.
So that was the biggest proof that, okay, people will pay for this. You don't want to develop a product, again, around an idea that you have, go out there and say, okay, guys, buy it, and then they're like, I don't want this, or they don't pay for it, and you have to pivot somewhere completely different. So we made sure that we had some paying customers before we developed it, right? And that was one of the biggest things you wanted to do.
That was the biggest thing, because I thought, what's the point of building something that you can't sell?
Carl and Tori have been in business for over 3 years. They pride themselves on running in the black and only hiring people when their revenue allows it. With business steadily increasing, Carl and Tori realized that their dad had a lot to do with their lives as entrepreneurs.
The thing that always stood out with my dad is he was always that resource for people when they came into the store. He always had the answer, and when he was doing that, he was building strong relationships with his customers. And I guess we never really thought about how that would impact us today, but it's really interesting that our product helps businesses just like my dad's communicate with customers in that personal way. So
I never thought of it like that, but it's true.
Yeah.
Because every time I go in there as a kid, he'd say, "Hey, if you need anything, just holler." He wouldn't mind getting in the conversations with his clients. He would go. He'd do anything for them. A lot of times it'd be very boring conversations, but he'd do it anyway. And so that relationship, and we'd always ask him, why are you successful here as this, on Main Street when other businesses have failed? Other places might have cheaper prices here and there, and it's all about the service. People keep coming back because of that service, and we're trying to build a lot of that philosophy into the product that we have.
Carl and Tori learned a lot from their dad, and now Tori is looking to pass on the same entrepreneurial spirit to his kids.
My dad put us in this entrepreneurial environment that I didn't even understand, and then all of a sudden it clicked to me, like, I'm doing the same thing for my kids. Well, they might not see me as an entrepreneur, but they see what I'm doing, and that's the first time it really clicked for me that I had Taylor in here building this floor, and I took Nick to a conference, and he's doing these things, and I bring, they come in here and they see this thing as their life too. So it is this cycle that's gonna continually go.
I see the kids doing that. They're not just there just to visit. They're not just there. Of course, they want to see their father and their uncle, but they're there to really observe and to help. They like to get a hand in there and help, and they're paying attention. You can tell when kids are paying attention, and they're doing just exactly that.
Located in east central Iowa on the only part of the Mississippi River that runs east to west is the city of Muscatine. This river town is famous for its history of manufacturing pearl buttons made from shells harvested from the muddy river bottom. Today, Muscatine is known for a different type of manufacturing, one that lights up stadiums across the globe. Musco Lighting is a global name in the sports lighting industry. Musco Lighting was formed by Joe Crookham and Myron Groden, but this wasn't their first business venture together. Long before these two joined forces, Joe was a lawyer in Oskaloosa and Myron was an engineer who were brought together by a mutual associate.
Way back at the beginning, a fellow named Dennis Lee went to school together, high school together, and we actually went to Iowa State together. Actually got our first job together. We decided one day that, what we really enjoyed doing engineering work, but we also thought that, there ought to be something better. We'd like to be our own boss, like to be, be able to make it on our own, so to speak. And so we sat around one night and got to talking about it, and we said, let's start a business. Finally, we developed a little thing called a scriber. It's for a little retractable scriber for machinists that, they put these things in their pockets. And so the problem is they have a very sharp point. And so we made it retractable so it wouldn't poke you when you put it in your pocket. But what we found out is that, we were pretty good at engineering things. We were not good at selling things. And so we decided one day that we really needed somebody who was more capable in that area than we were.
During the very first week of my practice of law, after getting out of law school, I had a client that came in. He actually was intending to see my brother, who was also a lawyer, and he wanted to get a contract drawn up to buy a piece of property that he was going to put a mobile home on. While they were typing up the contract, I began to talk to him, and he ended up telling me that he and another person had an idea for some tools, and they were thinking about trying to get a business started manufacturing tools. And I became interested in the storyline, ended up suggesting to him that I'd be interested in helping out, not on a fee basis as a lawyer, but just being part of it. And that was the beginning of our business.
The three partners, Dennis, Myron, and Joe, were now in the tool business. Though it took a while for Myron and Joe to see eye to eye, eventually they established trust with each other. Joe's first task was to find a market for the retractable scriber that Dennis and Myron had already designed.
He wrote like 300 letters trying to get somebody interested in this stuff. And nobody responded positively, except one company wrote back and said they weren't interested, but they knew a company that might be. And so a company called Brown & Sharp. And Joe got on the phone and made a trip out there, and one day came back with an order for 5,000 of these scribers. We had sold up to that point in time a few hundred of these things. So this 5,000 scribers, this was a big deal to us. I mean, it was huge. And so I got to talking about it, and the problem with 5,000 units is if you're making everything by hand, that is an enormous problem. It's a tremendous amount of time and effort has to go into it. If we could sell 15,000 of these things, then we could afford to tool it, and so we could automate it and make these things with so much less effort and less cost. And so Joe, being the ultimate salesman, got a hold of Brown & Sharp and said, we appreciate the order for 5,000, but for an OEM manufacturer, which we were selling to Brown & Sharp under their name, 15,000 is our minimum. So Brown and Sharp said, okay, we'll buy 15,000 of them, which, you know, Dennis and I were sitting on pins and needles because we figured we'd blow the whole thing, but it turned out well.
Even though they saw some success with Brown and Sharp and later X-Acto, they found manufacturing for the tool industry very difficult. It was dominated by a few big companies. To really have a chance at success, they needed to focus on an industry where they could actually compete.
We ended up looking around, ended up talking to a guy named Bob Lyons that worked for the Iowa State Extension Service. And he came to me one day and said, there's a lighting company in Muscatine that's for sale. They're in financial straits, and so wouldn't be really expensive to buy them. And he said, my research on the lighting industry indicates that might be a good industry for you. I did a little more research on it and determined that there were about 2,500 companies in the United States in the lighting business of various types. And the 4 largest companies combined had less than a 20% share of the market, which meant it was a very fragmented market and one that we wouldn't be run over by anybody specifically. And so it was for that simple reason that we ended up buying a lighting company and ended up in the lighting industry.
By this time, Dennis had decided to leave the trio to chase after other pursuits. While maintaining their business in Oskaloosa, Myron and Joe bought Muscatine Lighting and renamed the company Musco. Myron and Joe took a serious look at the defunct company to see if there was anything worth salvaging.
I looked at the product line, Joe and I discussed it, and basically came to the conclusion there is almost nothing here. The one thing that they had, which we thought would be valuable, was they were making a sports lighting product. It was a quartz, incandescent quartz lighting system, essentially obsolete. But we could see there was a new technology coming at that point in time called metal halide. And so we took the metal halide technology and took that lighting concept that they had of putting fixtures on in a rack and placing it on poles. And we essentially scrapped all their products. And as it turned out, with a salesman like Joe, with all the benefits that he could paint that this product had, that became the one thing that we hung our hat on. And as it turned out, that was a good decision.
Musco started off small. They sold to rodeo arenas, racetracks, and sports complexes. But no one outside of the Midwest had really heard of Musco, which made it difficult for Joe to find new markets. At the same time, Myron and Joe had an idea for mobile lighting. Up until the early 80s, television crews couldn't broadcast live sporting events at night because the arenas were too dark. Joe made a trip to New York to pitch the idea of mobile lighting to ABC, NBC, and CBS.
ABC was very interested in the whole thing, and that led to us doing a test of how that would be done. We used Kinnick Stadium after the last football game that year.
Rented a big crane and put a lot of lights on it, and just to kind of prove out the concept to ABC. And turned out that it worked, but the products, the fixtures that we used were the ones that we're using for normal sports lighting. The problem is that they took way too many of them, and so you put all these fixtures up on a crane. It was a huge bank of lights, and so we had to shrink it down so it wasn't such a big sail in the wind, because if you're 150 feet in the air and the wind comes along, it blows the crane over. So we developed a new fixture, a 6,000 watt fixture. It was state of the art at that point in time. And Joe continued talking with ABC, and they decided they wanted to do an event in September. And since we've been talking about this, and we figured it was a year from September, and I said no, they want to do it next September. So we had, it was tremendously short time frame. It was something like 5 months. So we actually developed this entire product line, new fixtures, this huge cranes, and we essentially worked 24/7 to try to make it work.
ABC wanted the system built for the Notre Dame versus Michigan football game. To get the system built, Myron and Joe had to borrow $5 million. It was a huge risk. They not only needed to get the system built for that first game, they needed to find additional games to light. Myron and the Musco team met the deadline.
ABC had done a really nice job of including us in all the articles. We have newspapers from every state in the nation where ABC did a press release about the night game at Notre Dame and mentioned us in those. And before the game, I was standing outside the stadium by the truck, one of the trucks, and Chuck Howard, the VP of ABC, came by the truck, and we got chatting a little bit. And as he was getting ready to leave, I said, one of the things we'd hoped is that you would do some sort of mention for us on the telecast. That'd be important to us. And all Chuck Howard said was, we've got something put together, I think you'll like it. And that's how he walked away.
Tonight, 52 years after construction, the national appetite for college football justifying advanced technology to produce sufficient portable lighting. And ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to a first. The night the lights went on at Notre Dame Stadium, with 6 of these massive towers from Musco Sport Lighting casting a daylight-like glow over Notre Dame Stadium. And ABC...
That was exactly what they needed. In one night, Musco Lighting went from a little lighting company in Iowa to a nationally known and respected company in sports lighting. For the last 3 decades, Musco Lighting has been a major player in the arena lighting and mobile lighting business. They have even lit 8 Olympic Games, including the Summer Olympics in Rio. Initially, Joe and Myron would disagree on a lot of topics, but over time they learned to trust in each other, and that has allowed their business to grow.
The two of us together, anytime you get an engineer and a salesman, you're going to be at loggerheads because we come at things from different directions. But as it turns out, you need both of those kinds of things to make it work.
We ended up with a partnership that has some very high value to it because of the very different way we look at things. It's the different direction that we come at things that's so important.
Over the years, Myron and Joe have become a good team, and they promote the team concept to their employees.
The word team is so important to me. Whenever I write it, no matter where it appears, in the middle of a sentence or whatever, I always capitalize the word team because I think that's how you make things work. Nobody does anything by themselves of any consequence over any extended period of time. It's fun to be on a team and watch it come together and make really great things happen.